Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about listening with prejudice. This is something we've all been guilty of, some more than others, but it's an interesting question. And I mean it in a very specific sense. I'm not talking about racial bias or, that kind of stuff. The usual crap that we get in the comments from some people. No, I'm talking about the way we approach our relationship to specific artists and their work on disc. And I have a very concrete example that will illuminate what I mean. This is Richter in Warsaw, the famous Scriabin recital on Parnassus. Famous recital. And it's wonderful. It really is. You have to put up with the grotty sound. It's from 1972. It's live. It's all that stuff. Somebody probably had a microphone up their sleeve, whatever. But Richter is one of those artists who has a following, a big following. I'm not even talking about the rabid cult people. I'm just talking about an enormous following and weight of opinion that says he's great. Now, for a long time, I had a problem with that. I had a problem with that because Richter made a lot of crappy recordings. He really did, because he didn't care about recordings. He didn't care if they were captured live. He didn't care what kind of a piano he played on. He had a disdain for the entire standard classical music concert apparatus, which some people like. But the fact of the matter is, he was hot or cold. And when he was hot, he was amazing. And when he was cold, he was dreadful. But there are people who cast their critical faculties aside when approaching a Richter performance, and they give him a benefit of the doubt that he does not deserve. In other words, really everybody deserves the same benefit of the doubt, right? You listen to a piece of music with an open mind. Hopefully you know the work, if you're making comparisons between different recordings, and you decide whether it's a good version or not a good version. But in this case, you say to yourself, it's the legendary Scriabin recital from Warsaw. I'm supposed to love it. It's supposed to be great. Everyone's been telling me how fabulous it is. So when I listen to something, and maybe it sounds slow, or a rhythm sounds off, or there are missed notes, or something happens, and you say to yourself, well, I'm supposed to like it. And so it's really okay. And it's not okay. It is what it is. It's an error, it's a flaw, it's a weakness, it's a something. Or there's an interpretive choice, which is perverse, an extraordinarily slow tempo. Sometimes it can be a revelation, sometimes it can just be awful. Or the sound makes it so difficult you can barely hear what the interpreter is doing half the time. But you say, oh, well, yes, it sounds crappy. And yes, he's taking this at 1/8 the speed it's supposed to go. Celibidache, what's his name? Ballot, that guy, Maximiano Cobra. And you say, oh, but it's supposed to be that way. Therefore, it's wonderful. And the fact that I really don't like it, or the fact that it bothers me, is my fault, not their fault. Well, sometimes it can be your fault. More often than not, it's their fault. It really is. And that's what I mean by prejudice in listening. You work really, really hard to either like it or sometimes dislike it. It works both ways, because you believe you're supposed to. You've arrived at the final judgment before the act of listening occurs. And while the act of listening occurs, you are mediating between, this dissatisfaction you would otherwise feel if you didn't know that this was Richter. If it was Slobodny Bluchenheit, whoever that is, Slobodny Bluchenheit, unknown pianist. If it was Joyce Hatto, whose name was on, remember Joyce Hatto, the big Joyce Hatto scandal? her husband stole all these recordings and stuck his wife's name on it and talked about how she'd been sick and dying. And in her last days, she made thousands of records of the whole repertoire. They were all fabulous because, of course, he stole generally good recordings to stuff her name on. And everybody tried really hard to talk about how wonderful Joyce Hatto was. It was a wonderful exercise in just how foolish we can be made to look, because people made up their minds in advance what they were supposed to say or think or experience. And it was all just smoke and mirrors. And we do this to ourselves. We do this to ourselves all the time. It's not just with Richter. I mean, I was accosted recently. I did a video about it by a Yun Chan Lim fan about his recording of Tchaikovsky's The Seasons. Here's a wonderful, wonderful example. He made a decent recording of Tchaikovsky's The Seasons. It's not a work that is major by any definition. It's attractive. It's nice. But you listen to his version versus Pletniev's version or Ashkenazi's version, and you say, oh, he does this. He takes this slower. Therefore, it's profound. See, the issue is not noticing that there are differences or that they're necessarily good or bad, but what matters is the value judgments that we make, based on hearing these minute differences in interpretation, and we're willing to accept them. We'll accept them from Yun Chan Lim because we think he's a prodigy, he's a major guy, he's important. If you're Korean, it's because he's Korean, or whatever reason. Doesn't matter what the reason is. You're willing to accept whatever he does, and you're willing to give it value and additional legitimacy in a way that you would not give to another artist or some other artist, or even him if you didn't know he was the person playing, if it was anonymous. You heard the thing anonymously. And that's happened to me. It's happened to all of us. There are artists who I admire tremendously. And an artist that you admire tremendously, you are more likely to listen to more carefully. And you're going to hear more than you would with someone who you don't care about, or someone who you've already prejudged. Oh, Karajan, everything is slick and awful. I just had this happen to me with Karajan Schubert. Karajan's always slick. He's all legato. It's all strings. It's all, And then you listen to something and you think, oh, gee, that's really good. Who was it? Oh, it was Karajan. Really? It didn't sound like what I expect Karajan to sound like. It's a natural thing. I mean, as a critic, I'm hyper conscious about it because I try to eliminate that aspect. I try to listen as anonymously as I can to these things. I mean, in other words, not to even think of who the performer is or what they're doing. I don't want to know. I just want to hear the music and decide whether I like it or not. And then if it's somebody who I usually detest and it turns out I love it, I think that's great. It's great. It means that my prejudice has been, incorrect, or it means, the minimum that you have to take everything as it comes and listen to it on a case-by-case basis. But people don't do that. People have already made up their minds before they even start listening to the thing. And the insidious part of this is not grotesque prejudice. I love everything Van Cliburn did because it's Van Cliburn, therefore it's fabulous. I don't even have to listen to it. I mean, that's, there's craziness. No. It's much subtler than that. It's the willingness to give more time and attention to certain things than other things of equivalent, value or merit, or if it's the same work, the same piece. I'm going to pay attention to this performance and not that performance. I'm going to listen more carefully to this one. I'm going to listen more frequently to this one than that one. All of those things influence our final judgments as to whether or not they're any good. And we have to be really careful when we do that. Because, some people, everybody has the right to find their happy medium, their level at which they've decided it's enough and they're satisfied. You could have simply purchased a recording of the Grieg Piano Concerto for $1.99 in a supermarket, or just streamed whichever one happens to be on your service, and you listened to it, you liked it, and that's fine. But for a lot of us, really want to learn the music, understand the music, and hear the most sympathetically interpreted versions of the music, we have to be careful. We have to be really, really careful not to prejudice ourselves when we listen. And so I just wanted to mention this. It was just something that was occurring to me when I was listening to the really splendid but sonically challenged and Richter Scriabin recital from Warsaw. Is it great? Yeah, I think it's great. Can he do no wrong? Well, it depends on what the next record sounds like. I'm not going to say, on the basis of this, that everything that he did, even in Scriabin, is necessarily superb or equally valuable. Nope. We have to keep on listening and take every single recording as it comes. And I'm just constantly reminded of this fact, that I wanted to mention it to you to see what your take is on this idea of prejudicing ourselves when we listen. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks for joining me. Take care.